What made America so great from 1955 to the 1970s was socialism. And I'm so sick and tired of people pretending that it wasn't deeply socialist policies which brought the greatest American economy that we have ever seen. Because when we had a Great Depression in the 1920s, FDR responded with socialist policies in the 1930s, which supported the individual American and created the middle class as we know it. And we saw Ronald Reagan absolutely decimate every social service that would help out any American or help them create or be put in the middle class. And what he did was he created this trickle down economics, imagining that billionaires, that corporations would would, because of their profits, they would feel so generous that they would allow their workers. But that is not what capitalism does not create the middle class. Socialism creates the middle class. Capitalism creates billionaires who hoard money and prevent their workers from getting their due share.
Before Ronald Reagan's presidency, much of America's strength and global dominance was built on programs rooted in socialist principles. The New Deal, introduced by Franklin D. Roosevelt in the 1930s, put millions to work, built critical infrastructure, and established Social Security, a safety net that lifted many elderly people out of poverty. After World War II, government investment in housing, education, like the GI Bill, and public health care programs like Medicare and Medicaid in the 1960s helped build the middle class. Union power was strong, wages were rising with productivity, and taxes on the wealthy and corporations were high enough to fund public services and infrastructure. This era, from the 1940s to the 1970s, saw the highest levels of shared prosperity in U.S. history. That trajectory changed sharply under Ronald Reagan, who pushed trickle-down economics by slashing taxes for the wealthy, gutting unions, deregulating industries, and cutting public spending. Reagan told Americans that wealth at the top would eventually trickle down to everyone else, but that promise never materialized. Instead, wages stagnated, the rich got richer, and public services were defunded. Corporate power exploded, while workers lost bargaining power. This was the moment when America's economic system shifted from broadly shared growth to deep inequality, paving the way for decades of financial instability, homelessness, and poverty for working people.
Trump is continuing these Reagan policies of preventing collective bargaining, of preventing unions from doing their bargaining so that they can get their workers the best wages they need. We have prevented our education system from teaching our schools and giving the education that we need to create workers. What we are trying to do is create an economy where we have workers that can work for billionaires, not people that can create a middle class existence for themselves. We are making lives harder for the middle class. When's the last time you heard the Republican Party talk about the middle class? They do not care about the average American. They only care about corporations. They do not care about making this country great again. They only care about profits for corporations. But what we should care about is creating more middle class families, about making this country better for middle class families. And over again, it is socialist policies that make a better and stronger economy for America. I am so sick and tired of hearing trickle down economics and understanding after 30 years why we are in this terrible situation, why the middle class is failing. We need a government that supports the American individual, supports the American family, and wants to create the middle class rather than destroy it.
Time and time again, socialism has had to step in when capitalism crashes under its own greed. In the Great Depression, it was public jobs, Social Security, and labor protections, not the free market. After the 2008 financial collapse, it wasn't Wall Street that rescued families. It was government bailouts, food stamps, and unemployment benefits. Even during the pandemic, when the economy froze, it was stimulus checks, eviction bans, and public health care responses that kept society from collapsing. Every time capitalism burns the house down chasing profit, it's socialism that shows up with the water.
Well, after 60 years of blockade from the world's greatest empire, it continues to be able to guarantee housing, healthcare, education for its people. No one is homeless in Cuba. It has the highest rates of doctors per capita. So, considering all that, I would say it's doing pretty darn good. It's under conditions that any non socialist country would have completely collapsed and perhaps even had famines over. But everyone is fed in Cuba. Everyone has the ability to get an education of the highest degree possible, and everyone has access to healthcare, and no one is homeless. So yeah, I would say it's doing pretty darn good.
If communism or socialism fails every time, why does the US always need to make it fail? Why not just let it fail on its own? Why does the US always feel the need to intervene? Just let it fail on its own. It always fails, right? Why sanction Venezuela, sanction Cuba, North Korea, etc. for decades and bomb these countries into oblivion, continually try to enact regime change in these countries? Why do all those things if socialism always fails? Maybe socialism always fails because of US imperialism. I know that's so crazy, right?
The U.S. won't let socialism succeed because its entire global power depends on proving that capitalism is the only path forward. If another country thrives under socialism, it exposes the lie that endless corporate profit and private ownership are necessary for freedom. That's why the U.S. has overthrown socialist leaders, sanctioned socialist countries, and spent billions on propaganda painting socialism as tyranny. Cuba, Chile, Venezuela, even democratically elected governments were punished not because they failed, but because they dared to succeed without bowing to capitalism. America's fear isn't socialism failing, it's socialism working.
Listen, I promise we're not going to get anywhere as a society if we don't accept a couple truths about capitalism and how it works. First of all, and this is a fact, capitalism values accumulation of wealth at the top over human life and human well being. As a system, we allow people to die more often. We allow shitty quality of life so that a couple privileges can exist for a couple people who exist in the 1%. Here's why. For starters, just in America, we have enough food to feed 136% of the population. If you look at that statistic, we have enough food to feed all Americans, and then we have enough to feed another third. The problem is we waste 133 billion pounds of food every year because we threw it away, because people didn't buy it, because people couldn't buy it, because they were too poor. That's interesting. Well, if these companies are already making money from the food that people can buy, why not just give this food away to the people who need it? Well, unfortunately, we have so much free food that if we gave it away, so much of the population could partake from that free food that it would put a dent into our profits. So just to be clear, if Walmart was to give around 15% of its food surplus away for free, mind you, a lot of this food being already unsellable, they could lose $3 to $10 billion of potential profit. That's a lot, even though they're still raking in almost $300 billion from food sales annually. So yeah, according to our system, that $3 to $10 billion that is already going to waste is worth more than the human lives $3 to $10 billion of food would save. Okay? Next, let's do housing. We have 28 to 30 vacant homes for every single homeless person in the US. But there are still homeless people in the US. Why? You could probably guess it's the same problem as before. Housing is commodified, so even though we have more than 50 million vacant homes, we've got to drive up the price so that landlords can make more money and sell these homes for millions instead of thousands. These homes that aren't being sold are just too expensive, so even though these landlords are making millions up to billions of dollars from the current homes they're renting, there's nothing we can do about this problem. At all. I mean, one of those houses could be a multimillionaire's third beach home. How can we possibly give that up for free? That privilege for a multimillionaire to own another house, that is what's killing people on the streets. Yep, because according to meritocracy theory, that multimillionaire could be you.
Profit under capitalism has come at the cost of people's basic survival. Skyrocketing healthcare costs, homelessness, underpaid labor, and mass debt are all symptoms of an economy that puts money before life. While countries around the world are shifting toward universal health care, public housing, and worker protections, the U.S. clings to capitalism because it serves the rich. Billionaires fund politicians, corporations write policy, and media giants sell the illusion of freedom while people drown in bills. Capitalism hasn't just failed Americans, it's made them suffer. And the U.S. keeps defending it because it's profitable for the few, not livable for the many. Here's the internet's best mom breaking down what socialism really means, not the bullcrap we were fed.
We villainize things like communism and socialism when most Americans couldn't even give you the definition of those things. It's just a big fear-mongering, oh, they take your cars, they take your house, and that's not true at all. So what is socialism? Because most people assume it's interchangeable with communism, but it's not. Back to our spectrum, communism we explained. If you look at socialism, the central difference is with socialism, they don't assume that everyone will just play nicely in the sandbox. There is a government, and that government, that state, owns all of the means of production. So instead of it being communally owned, like in communism, it's owned by a central state who will make sure they divvy it out in a fair manner to all of the constituents, okay? You have one party, one political party, as opposed to zero in communism. Socialism, we have one political party, that is the state that owns everything. You are still allowed to own private property, like your house or your car. You just can't own the means of production. So a simple example might be, you can own a t-shirt, but you can't own the factory that produces the t-shirt. The state owns that, and whatever comes from that is then divvied out. They decide how many t-shirts you can have, if that makes sense.